Hello and welcome to the commercial law update for the academic year 2020-2021. As you can probably imagine, given the year that we've had, the commercial law update this year is mainly going to centre around the two main topics of the day, coronavirus and Brexit. We are also going to look at another act as well that's come through, which is partially related to COVID but also has general application, so that might be particularly useful for you, especially if you're looking at insolvency. As always with these things, if you are interested in purchasing the entire course, which covers all the subjects that might come up on a commercial law module, then do be sure to check out the link in the description below. Nevertheless, let's get on with this update. Let's get started by taking a look at Brexit, and the best way to approach this is probably going to look at the perspective from both sides. So on this first slide, we're going to look at Brexit from an EU perspective, and then on the next slide we'll take a look at the same subject but from a UK perspective instead. So at the moment a deal between the UK and the EU looks very unlikely. I'm recording this at the end of September, and even though there is sort of talk about there maybe still being some sort of deal, it looks like that's potentially not going to happen, or if it does happen then it's going to be very limited in scope. So definitely something that you'll want to keep a watch on in terms of reading the news and seeing if anything changes between now and 31st of December, which is when Brexit is due to happen. The strange thing about the Northern Ireland situation is that it is part of the UK's custom territory, of course, but references to the EU's custom territory will include Northern Ireland, and that's all part of this Northern Ireland Protocol which gets so much press. Now, the problem from an EU perspective is that this potentially means that Northern Ireland could be used as a way to sneak into the free market that operates within the European Union, and that's something that they do not want. And so at the moment there are various regulations and decisions which are being considered by the EU Parliament as well as the EU government in general about tariffs and import quotas in relation to Northern Ireland. From a UK perspective, we're obviously in the same position in terms of a deal. Number 10 Downing Street doesn't look confident about getting a deal at the moment, and so that's just the situation that we're living with. Goods moving from Great Britain, i.e. England, Wales and Scotland, to Northern Ireland will require new customs processes, and the government is still in the process of actually setting those up and trying to work out exactly what they will look like. The government obviously wants to keep this disruption to a minimum, and so they're looking at various technological advances and ways to speed up the customs process between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but the reality of the situation is that that's going to be very difficult to do. And this so-called border in the Irish Sea looks like it's going to become a reality. One of the other things about Brexit from a UK perspective is the internal markets bill that is still working its way through Parliament at the moment, and does look like at some point it is going to get royal assent. Now, the main issue that's been in the headlines around the internal markets bill is that this is potentially going to cause a breach of international law. It certainly gives ministers the power to override international law where they choose to do so. So obviously that is very controversial, but in more simple terms, the idea of the internal markets bill is that there is going to be an internal market within Great Britain. So for example, you might have an import of chicken into England, and the idea is that if you can import chicken into England, then you should then be able to take that chicken from England and export it to Scotland without there being any issues. One of the main concerns around this is the idea that it's going to lower the sort of safety standards that are available in relation to certain products. Scotland, for example, might have higher regulations in relation to the quality of chickens that they want to import. But under the Internal Markets Bill, that would be specifically undermined because whatever happens, they would have to accept that chicken from England. So that's one of the reasons why it's especially controversial, and also the reason why the Scottish National Party are opposing it. Now, the other main issue that's been happening this year is obviously COVID-19, and there's going to be various rules and regulations that affect the way that business and commerce is done in the UK. Now, this has considered many things since lockdown has sort of eased up a little bit, so thinking about things how shops and businesses can reopen safely, and there's various rules and regulations around that. Thinking about when employees and employers are wearing face coverings, and also when customers who are entering a business also have to wear face coverings as well. Now, coronavirus is obviously related to data collection in the sense that we have things like track and trace. You've probably come across this yourselves if you've gone into like a coffee shop or a restaurant and you've had to provide some data. Now, this obviously creates a new burden on businesses because they are in some cases having to manage that data. And so it's very worth being aware of the sort of GDPR implications of that. There's also been financial support for businesses from the Treasury, whether that's the Eat Out to Help Out in relation to restaurants, but also more commonly the furlough schemes in general. Now, the one act that I would draw your attention to this year is the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act of 2020. Now, there are some temporary changes to give businesses more breathing room around COVID-19. Obviously, this has been a very difficult time for a lot of businesses, and many are unfortunately going under. And the idea behind this act is that it just gives them a bit more space if they do need to pay their debts. Now, this has been an issue that has been problematic in the UK for a while. It's often been the case that as soon as a business is sort of struggling or about to go under, then that kind of is the death knell, even if a company might be able to turn things around. The permanent changes in relation to insolvency law are the idea that we're going to offer more permanent breathing room in the form of moratoriums when the survival of a company is, quote, likely. Now, what likely means in this situation is obviously going to be a subject of interpretation, so that will be something to look out for in the courts. But in terms of the actual provisions themselves, there's going to be a possibility of payment holidays if a company is in significant debt, and it also restricts the activities of creditors to sort of foreclose on a business ahead of time and giving companies more of a chance to pay. And that concludes our commercial law update for the academic year 2020-2021. Unfortunately, at the time of recording, things like COVID and Brexit are ongoing concerns, and so the legislation and the rules in this area are going to be continually subjected to change, even going into next year. So the main advice that I would give you as students is just to mainly keep an eye on the news and what's actually going on in the world. You're not going to get a perfect answer, but being aware of what's actually happening in the political world is going to really give you an advantage over other commercial law students. I'll be back with an update in the future, but for now, bye!